All right, hi everybody, welcome back. We're doing videos again. Life got in the way, in a good way, but now it's time to get back into making some scooter videos. We'll also do some motorcycle stuff coming up. What I wanted to talk about first was my Royal Alloy GT150 here, and it is well past time for me to put new tires on this. Now I'm going to cut in here and you'll see some video of what my rear tire looks like. Here you can see my rear wheel and just how much I've burned down these tires. Here's your wear indicator. So that's a little bar they put inside the tread that when you get to it, it tells you that's the end of your tire. You can see over on this side of the tire itself, there's a little TWI indicator. And right there, I'm into the tire wear indicator. You can see if we look down from the top, it's pretty well squared off. That's what I get for riding this scooter a lot, directly upright and hammering on it in traffic. So that's why we need to get this wheel off, make sure we get new tires on the scooter. But it's time to go ahead and get those tires changed out. And I know the Royal Alloy is a little different than just your traditional motorcycle or even some of the other scooters I've worked on. I figured it wouldn't hurt to make a video, talk to you a little bit about how you're going to go ahead and get the wheels off of this so you can take them into your shop and have them changed without paying couple hours of labor rates for them to take the wheels off the scooter. It's really pretty straightforward. You need a handful of tools and you need to put your scooter somewhere that it can sit upright. Now, one thing we're going to notice here, I do have a jack stand underneath the scooter, and I've got it set up that way so that it keeps my front end nice and free spinning, but I can still get the back tire off. So essentially the scooter's now tripoded on my center stand and that jack instead of on that center stand and my front wheel. Means I can leave it for a day or two while the wheels are off and the tires are getting changed. Let's take a look at first what tools we need and then what we need to do to get either the front or the rear wheel off. Of course, if you're changing tires, always better to do that in pairs. Taking a quick look at the tools we're going to need. Mine is a little bit different because I have that aftermarket exhaust on the scooter, but pretty straightforward. 14mm wrench, 13mm wrench. We're going to need a 12mm Allen, 13mm socket so that we can get the header bolts off, 17mm socket, your choice of how you're going to drive said socket. I've got my choice between the T-handle, either one of my standard ratchets, or if I want to go for the small impact driver, that's another option. I've got the 6mm Allen head here in case I need to remove the disc bolts here, which we're going to discover as we take this off again, or in my case, it's going to remove the PM tuning exhaust. So that's the tools we need. Let's dive into getting this job accomplished. First thing we do to take our front wheel off is we're going to remove this bolt that holds that little piston looking thing for our brake. So 13mm wrench on the back side of it to hold it still. Then we're going to grab our 13mm socket, put it on this side, and go ahead and remove that bolt. Remember which side the washers go on. That's always important so you don't lose anything. And we'll just finish pulling that off. That bolt's out of the way. We've got our washer on this side, our nut and a smaller washer on the back side. And we just put those aside until we need to put everything back together once our tires have been changed. One thing we do have to do is remove the brake rotor from this wheel. So you should do that first and foremost. I'm gonna cut the video around so we talk about it in the right order, but let's go ahead and take a look at that. Before we do any removing of the wheel, we do want to go ahead and break loose and remove our brake disc bolts. Those are 6mm Allen heads, and they can be in there really tight. So you might need something that either gives you that leverage like this, or you may want to use a T-handle wrench, or even just a standard ratchet will work. Do that before you get to the point I'm at, and your life is going to be a lot better. Removing the front wheel is pretty straightforward. We have a 13mm nut on this bolt right here. Over on this side here, we've got a 17mm nut. This is going to be one of our 3 bolts out of the way. And you'll save these and make sure you have Loctite when you put them back in. If you've done it like I do, then you need to kind of support the wheel as you turn everything, and you need to hold it still while you break the bolts loose. If you do this while the wheel is still in the scooter properly, you're going to have a much better time. With everything out of the way, we can pull this back, remove our whole braking assembly. You don't want to just hang this by the lines, so we're going to go ahead and zip tie this out of the way. But now our front wheel is free and can pull out. Here, I just have it zip tied as a finished assembly right off the coil. Wheels out of the way. You will need to pay attention. This is your speedo drive. This is going to fall out of the other side of the wheel on the right side of the scooter when you take it out. Don't let this get broken or damaged. We'll talk about reassembling it when it's time to do so. You're just going to make sure pegs line up with the space in the wheel. That is all you have to do. The front wheel is out, and this can live like so until it's time to put things back together. Our next step, we're going to remove the exhaust so that we can get the rear wheel off. Now, we looked at those two 13mm bolts that hold the exhaust on. Take your extension of choice. In my case, I'm going to use my big T-handle here. You're going to go up and just undo those two bolts. Your exhaust, regardless of whether it's the factory exhaust or something cool like this PM tuning unit, will still hang in place where it's held up. You're then going to remove the other hanger bolts to drop it down. So let's go ahead. Now sometimes you can do this without getting completely under the scooter, and you can kind of peek through where the center stand is. Other times you do need to just stick your head under there somehow. Fortunately, in my case, it just comes off nice and clean. Working by feel is the other option, but that just depends. If you're comfortable with it, I've done this enough times now that kind of know what's going on. So we'll just continue taking these off until we've got our two 13mm nuts out of the way and our exhaust can be removed. Here we can see there's one of our nuts just barely held onto the stud, and the other one is on the other side there. So I'm going to go ahead and back those the rest of the way off. Okay, with that done, now it's time to get the rest of our exhaust hanger off on the PM tuning pipe, which you should be running if you're not, because it looks great and it sounds cool. It's going to be a 13mm wrench for the back of this bolt, 6mm Allen for the front. You can go back and check the other video we did about installing the exhaust to see how to remove the factory one. To be frank, it's been long enough, I don't quite remember. Pull this off, but we do need to be careful to keep everything intact because it's the only thing holding the exhaust up, and we'd love to not just slam it down. Dropping a bolt is a better option. And our whole pipe comes off. And set this off to the side. We can even give it a good cleaning if we so choose. We might go ahead and clean this before we put it all back together. Okay, with the exhaust out of the way, it's time to remove the rear wheel itself. You're going to have the 5 bolts here. Now the torque spec from the factory is 60 foot-pounds. Who knows what they did in China? I've tried these by hand and it sucks. Yeah, you put a breaker bar on it, you probably could. I'm recovering from collarbone surgery, so I don't need to put that much torque. I'm just going to bring out the big guns, and all we do is line it up and break them all loose. Now that those are loose, I can remove them with a socket or just my little 12mm here. Keeping a knee under the wheel just to keep it in place doesn't hurt. If you're on the ground, you can use a block of wood. If you're actually on your workbench, you can use a block of wood. I am hanging off the workbench a bunch because I have a lot of projects to do, so my bench has been changed a little bit. But we just go ahead and we pull all 5 of these bolts out. Nice big hardy things. Actually kind of a nice little piece of machining there. That's 4. And just like that, our rear wheel comes off, and we're going to go ahead and discover that if you have the PM tuning exhaust, you also need to remove this gold plate before you can take the wheel out. Otherwise, it's just going to bump on everything. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And now that that's out of the way, remove our last lug again. And there we go. Another wheel ready to be changed. Hopefully you can kind of see on camera just how flattened off this wheel is. I am no small shaved ape, and I ask a lot out of the scooter, so not surprised to see that, but nice little piece of kit this. Deep dish on the wheel from the backside. And we can, while we're in here, take a look at our brakes and make sure that all looks good. We can check our brake pads. I'm gonna go ahead and do that just because I'm in here. We'll get these loaded up in the truck and drop them off at the shop. They've already ordered my new Pirelli tires, so those should be in. And we'll be all set to go in just a moment. And just like that, we've got our new Pirelli tires mounted up. One thing to consider is if you're taking this to a shop to have the tires put on, and maybe they weren't the ones who sold you the Royal Alloy or anything, you know, they'll probably pay attention to the directionality of the tread, but that's something to consider. So on the Pirelli Diablo Rosso scooter tires that I put on here, they don't make a rear tire in our size, which is a 120. They start their rears at, I think, 130. So for Pirelli, if you put on a 120 at the rear, it's a directional tread, and there's a little indicator here. Let's see if we can first locate it. There we go. So it's tire rotation, rear should rotate that way, front should rotate this way. So the difference being a lot of the rear tires on the newer stuff is all dual compound. The center strip is harder than the outside. And if it's a dual compound tire, that typically is on the rear only, at least for the scooter market that I found. So just something to make sure you pay attention to. Double check it when you pick your tires up. Fortunately, I was there. Guy works on my scooters when it's something I can't do. And good dude got me in right away. So now we're just gonna go ahead and we're gonna reinstall the tires. Pretty much installation is the opposite of the removal, right? Same as anything. We're gonna take the scooter tire, get it lined back up into our hub here, and we're gonna put all of our bolts in. 60 Newton meters, so whatever that is in foot-pounds, I'll do the math. That's what we're gonna torque these big lug bolts to. If you want, you can put a dab of Loctite on them. I don't think I will, I'll just torque them into the spec. Another thing to consider before you take this to your dealer or to your shop, whoever's putting your tires on, this little chrome cap here. If they're gonna balance the tires, they're gonna have to remove that chrome cap. Oftentimes, in my opinion, it's better if I'm the one to take parts apart, right? If the plastic cap is going to break, I'd rather be the one to break it than the shop. Some people will tell you they'd rather have the shop do it because then they're responsible for replacing it. But that's a debate you have to have between you and the shop. I don't want to have that one. So pop the cap out. All you got to do is push on the back of it here and it'll pop out like that. Put this off to the side and save it. And then we just put it back in, press it down. We've got our nice shiny cap back in. We're going to go ahead and time lapse this one just so you don't have to sit here and watch me put it all on, but it's going to be the opposite of what I did. I'll put the tire on, I'll torque my bolts down, then I will mount my exhaust hanger and then the exhaust itself. And once that's all done, we'll move on to the front of the scooter. Okay, a couple tips from your good buddy Alex on doing the rear tire. First and foremost, don't mount the back of the exhaust before you mount the front of the exhaust. Those two 13mm nuts on the exhaust studs started so that it holds your exhaust in place and it's where it needs to be. If you mount the back of it first, then you don't have anywhere to move the front of it. With the PM tuning exhaust, it's in particularly a challenge because there is a joint here where it can actually twist. Just something to be considerate about. Now, the really important thing, if you're having your tires balanced, which I guess you probably should, and they put wheel weights on, they're going to want to put wheel weights on the inside lip as far towards the center as they can. That doesn't work, and I'm going to show you why. Here are my wheel weights. Originally, they were mounted back here. Doesn't work because when that comes around up to this, your wheel weights will actually interfere with the brake caliper right there. Just this tiny little weight is too thick to fit in that gap. So make sure the wheel weights are basically outside of this lip right here. We're back over to the front wheel here. And this is where we're going to have to put our rotor onto the front wheel and get this little guy inserted into place. So this spacer piece here gets inserted into the wheel. We also need to make sure that, which is our speedometer drive, has two little tabs on it. Bring you in closer and you can see there are the two little tabs. So those two tabs index with these two tabs on the wheel. Brake disc bolts go right in here, and those need blue Loctite. Couple of things to remember when you're doing this. The torque spec for our brake rotor bolts is 18 foot-pounds or 25 Newton meters. And we're going to want to make sure we use Loctite. So just blue Loctite, nice and simple. That's a 6 millimeter Allen head. Again, I recommend you have Allens on both a wrench, or I should say a ratchet, as well as a T-handle. I love a T-handle for just getting into places. As we go through this, 25 foot-pounds for this, and it is 40 foot-pounds, 45 foot-pounds for the front axle nut. So when you put that in and you tighten it up, 45 foot-pounds there. I think our top bolt up here is like 13. We're just going to do that to what we call the German spec, just guten tight. Let's put the time lapse up and get this knocked out. Got new shoes on the scooter. I'm really excited to try out these Pirellis on here. They look like real sports bike tires. They feel like sport bike tires. They're gonna match the tires on my track bike, which is kind of fun. Couple things to note here, just to go through it, right? Take your exhaust bolts off at the top first, put them on first. That's important. You have to remove any hanging apparatus you have for your exhaust to get to that rear wheel and to get it out. On the front, now these brake rotor bolts are kind of like Swiss cheese. So if you can, when you pull them out and you have a day or two, it wouldn't hurt to order new high quality brake rotor bolts. I'll probably look into that myself and see if I can figure out what the correct ones are. But if not, just make sure you're using a tight fitting Allen head in there and you're not letting it slip, because all it takes is just rounding out that a little bit and you're gonna have a real bad day. Beyond that, making sure your speedometer is lined up and that you've got all your bolts back together, you should be all set to go. Other things taken apart on this, so I can't get it out right away. But you guys are going to see the video. I hope you enjoy these. I know it's been a long time since I made anything. Kind of lost the motivation for a little while there, but I know there's people out there who find it useful, and I do find this really, really a lot of fun. So if you enjoy it, that's great. Like it, share it, whatever you want to do. I do these because I'm going to work on the scooter anyway, and if I can help you guys out there working on your Royal Alloy or any of your other scooters, all the better. But with that, I'll sign off, and I'll see you on the next video when we do, who the hell knows.